could show the movie Brokeback Mountain. Does anyone know what the movie Brokeback Mountain is about? Everyone kind of know? All right. So when he stood up and said this, he said he was offering the amendment because he had a dream the night before, and John Wayne had come to him in a dream and told him that there was no such thing as gay cowboys, and therefore he must stop the viewing of this movie within the state of Missouri. Now I kind of giggled when I heard that, because clearly he's never been to the big gay rodeo in the Kansas City area and seen some of the toughest, scariest, most redneck, openly gay men you have ever seen. I mean, it clearly is something that I think would blow his mind, and I really wanted to get him to come to this rodeo with me, but I just never was able to. He actually didn't like to talk to me much. But he, that's what I thought I was getting into. So I heard that story about that guy. I kind of knew how kooky a couple of these other guys were because they were from my area. And then I, meet this guy at this bus, and he's telling me, he's this redneck homophobe, and I'm just thinking, what have I walked into? Because it's just one story after another after another. And I'm getting a little more nervous about all of this, and to fast forward, a few weeks go by, and we come back and we have another orientation, and I'm on the Senate floor, and I don't even know what to expect anymore, because every time someone opens their mouth, something incredibly nutty comes out of their mouth, and at this point, I'm just I'm rolling with it, but I don't know what to expect. And this guy walks up to me, and he says, "Senator Justice," and he shakes my hand. He's like, my name's Jack, and I am your parents' senator. And I'm like, oh, cool, very good. He's like, I represent Southwest Missouri, I represent Taney County, and that sort of thing. I said, that's fantastic, it's great to meet you. My parents told me to look out for you. He said, you're a good guy. He said, yeah. And he said, I have to ask you though, how come you didn't tell me you were Lebanese? And I looked at him, I'm like, really? I'm like, do I have to go through this again? And I'm like, I'm sorry, I don't understand. Because I thought maybe he was confused or something was going on. And he's like, yeah. I just heard you're the first openly Lebanese senator in the history of the state of Missouri. And then he smiles, and I see this twinkle in his eye, and I'm like, oh my gosh, this guy's going to be my friend. I really like this guy, because he was pulling my leg. And that guy ended up being not just one of my best friends in the Senate, but one of my best friends on the planet. And he's unfortunately not in the Senate anymore because of term limits. He's termed out. But he and I formed a friendship that not only became the basis of some amazing political successes that I've been able to make in the Missouri Senate, but just frankly one that's carried on beyond that. And he made it clear that no matter what my situation was, no matter who I was, or that I was a woman, that I was gay, that I was whatever, that he was going to be an ally of mine. And that was kind of the turning point when I realized it wasn't going to be that bad. It wasn't going to be as scary as I thought. Fast forward just a little bit, has anyone ever heard of a filibuster? Does anyone know what that is? All right. Now, if you've heard of the filibuster in Washington, D.C., with the exception of Rand Paul and the drone thing, which I applaud him just because they don't do those kind of filibusters anymore. I don't even know what the drone issue is. I'm trying not to pay any attention to it. But with the exception of that filibuster in D.C., they don't actually filibuster. They just say they're going to filibuster. In Jefferson City, it's the exact opposite. We are, Mr. Smith goes to Washington, you stand on the floor until you collapse into your chair, kind of filibuster. And so people will talk for hours and hours and hours and days even. My first year that I was down there, I participated in one of those filibusters. It was 32 hours long. We just kept passing the baton, and we would just take over the floor, and we went on for 32 hours. Because there was so much filibustering going on that first legislative session, I got to spend a lot of time sitting in the back room talking to these senators and getting to know them and trying to break through some of these things. And I think that probably having that happen helped out tremendously with breaking down some of the barriers, and it showed to me the importance of having women at the table and having gay people at the table and having lawyers at the table. Because and frankly having people from the Kansas City area at the table, because they had misconceptions about me and I had misconceptions about them. And one of the guys that I spent a long time talking to was the redneck homophobe who had banned gay marriage in the state of Missouri. And I asked him what he meant by that. And he said he was actually the guy who had carried the bill that ended up going to the ballot in 2004. 2004? Yeah, 2004. That Missouri was overwhelmingly passed, I think 72%, that made a constitutional amendment that says marriage shall be between a man and a woman. He carried that bill that put it on the thing. So we started talking, and you talk about your families, you talk about your dogs, you talk about whatever, and then you start talking about baseball and TV shows. And then finally he leans over, he's like, and everyone calls me Jolie. My name's Jolie, but yeah, I think when you're from the South or a rural area, just Jolie makes more sense. So, Jolie, he said, I watched that show, The L Word. I don't know if anybody has seen this show before. It probably was off the air before you were born. So it's this show about this idealized lifestyle of really fancy, pretty lesbians out in LA. And it's lots of women, having relationships with women. And it's exactly the kind of thing that heterosexual men would love because it's interesting to look at. And he said, yeah, I watched that. He said, my wife doesn't like it very much. I said, I wouldn't suspect that she does. He said, but I think it's pretty good. It's got a good story going on. So that's his first thing. So I could see what he was trying to do. He's trying to reach out to me. He's doing that conversation that many people in a minority have where, hey, I've got a gay friend, or, I've got a Jewish friend, or, where they try to make that first bridging the gap. And I'm like, all right, he's trying to do this. I'm going to roll with it. So the next time we're sitting in the back room and one of these filibusters is going on, he says, my kid's godmother is actually gay. She has a partner. And so now we're starting to get somewhere. Now we're kind of talking a little bit. And he said, I just can't get on this gay marriage thing. I said, I understand that. I said, it's a tough thing. I said, but I said, Senator, did you know that in Missouri it's still perfectly legal to fire someone because they're gay? In Missouri, there is no protection. You can be sitting in your cubicle at your office, and someone could walk in and they could say, you are gay, you are fired, leave right now. And there's nothing you can do about it. And he's like, really? And I said, yeah, really. He said, well, that's not right. And I said, I know it's not right. I said, that's all I'm trying to do here. I'm trying, on these issues, because the issue had come up, are you trying to, bring gay marriage or whatever. I said, no, I'm just trying to make it so that you can't get fired just because who you love. And he said, oh. He said, well, Jesus wouldn't do that. And I said, no, Senator, he wouldn't do that. Well, then we need to fix that. And I said, all right. I said, I've got a bill. You want to be my co-sponsor? He said, yeah, I'll do that. So this guy signs on. First time in the history of the Senate, we get a Republican as a co-sponsor on this bill. We always have lots of Democrats, but now we've got a Republican as a co-sponsor on the bill. And we're moving forward, and he slowly works his way into more leadership type positions, and this bill gets a little bit farther every year. He ended up, unfortunately, before we got it passed, he ended up terming out. We have term limits in the state of Missouri, and he actually couldn't serve as a senator anymore. But he had not had enough of Jefferson City, and because he's in the majority party, he decided he wanted to take a hand at going over to the House of Representatives, which is really a nutty place. But he decided he wanted to do that, and so he ran and won, and he's over in the House now, where he sponsors the bill in the House as well. And the number of people who have shifted on this issue in the 7 years that I've been there is unbelievable. The ranks of Republicans now who are on board with this, because of the fact that he and I had those conversations, because of the fact that statewide groups like PROMO, which is our statewide LGBT advocacy group, because they come down every year for lobby days and talk to the legislators, and they go and they say, hey, I'm your constituent, would you do this? And it just has changed dramatically. And as a matter of fact, I unfortunately didn't get to hear it because I was out of the country over spring break on a trade mission with the governor. But while I was gone, as they were gearing up for the gay marriage discussion at the Supreme Court, there was a news piece on National Public Radio. So it was on National, and it was about the shift of people's opinions nationally. And one of the people who was interviewed was the senator. It was the senator and now Representative Engler out of Farmington, Missouri. And he was interviewed. He said, yeah, I'm not quite there on the marriage thing, not there yet, but I think you should have all the same rights, and I don't think you should be fired. This guy has made such an amazing journey, and I think to me that is just probably my best example of why it's important to have a diverse group of people at the table in Jefferson City. Because the reality is that if we weren't down there, if we weren't in the room, they'd be talking about us instead of talking to us. And that includes on women's issues as well. there are several times, and it's so interesting to get together with groups of women legislators across the country, because we all sit in a room, and one of the first things after we all catch up and this and that is we just talk about how exhausted we are, because in addition to everything else that we have to do, you know, we've got our family lives, we've got our day jobs, because most state level legislators have day jobs in addition to their legislative jobs. We have, and then all of our duties as legislators in the legislature, we have to put on this extra thing so that we can be part of this club, so that we can move our legislative agendas forward. And that's a difficult place to be. And that means a lot of times that after an insanely long day where you are exhausted and can't take anything else, that you have to go sit in a room full of dudes who just want to drink scotch and smoke cigars. And yeah, you may not want to do that, but that's something that you kind of have to do. I know a lot of women that have picked up golf just because they need to be on the golf course. I will never pick up golf. I'm just saying that right now. I just think it's a good walk spoiled, and I think that there's a lot of ways that I can bond with I'd rather stay up late in the room with the scotch and the cigar than I would on a golf course. To that end, though, there have been times where we've had meetings on the golf course, where we've done things on the golf course, and I'll say, all right, guys, how about this? I'll be your beer girl. I'll come out, I'll drive your cart, I'll deliver this and that, and they're like, all right, that's cool. And you know, and that's how I do it. It is interesting, though, the extra attention that people in minority positions in public eye have to pay to making sure that we are able to get in and fit in. But when we do it, it is so incredibly valuable, because then we start to move our issues forward. One of the last things I want to tell you before I kind of wrap up about where I am and open it up for questions. When I first came into the legislature, my number one priority was not the LGBT issues. Those are incredibly important to me. But my number one priority were the issues that were facing the constituents that I represent, but primarily the clients that I had in my legal practice. I mentioned that I'm a pro bono lawyer, and that I oversee all of the free legal work for my law firm, and we do about 30,000 hours a year, and we focus almost exclusively on child advocacy issues. And so most of my time is spent representing kids who are charged with juvenile delinquencies, kids who are in the foster care system, the parents of children when they're removed from their care and put into state care, foster parents themselves, adoptive parents. I mean, this is what I do. I sleep, eat, breathe it. That's all I do when I'm not in the legislature. And there were some things that I saw that needed to be fixed. And frankly, I mean, I said I kind of reluctantly went into messes because of bad laws in Jefferson City, that I wanted to get on the front end of it. So it wasn't a hard sell to get me to run. But I will tell you that what I did was I went down there with the number one priority of increasing the child care assistance in the state of Missouri for working parents. At the time, we were 50th in the nation. Actually, we were 51st in the nation, because the District of Columbia was even better than us. And it's funny, because anyone who gets involved in state politics very often, they always talk about, well, at least we're not Mississippi. I will tell you that in several areas, actually scores of areas, we are worse than Mississippi. Our funding on issues related to things such as higher ed, K through 12, safety net programs is actually at the bottom of the barrel on many different areas, and it's something that I wanted to focus on. But the issue was child care assistance. At the time, if you made more than $7.12 an hour, and your boss came to you and said, I would like to give you a raise, you are a great employee, I would like to give you a raise to $7.50 an hour. The working parent, usually a mom, but a working parent would have to say, I'm sorry, I can't take that raise. Well, why can't you take that raise? Because my child care assistance under the state level right now, the eligibility cutoff is $7.13 an hour. So if I go from $7.12 to $7.50, I lose my child care assistance, and my child care rates then jump from $25 a week to $140 a week. Well, clearly, $7.12 to $7.50 is not going to make up that difference. And what we were doing was artificially trapping working moms where they could never break out of the poverty cycle, because they could never accept a raise, so that they could stop getting the subsidized child care assistance. At least they couldn't do it until they got out of, until their child was not in the need of child care assistance or child care. anymore. And so I made it my goal to get this thing passed, and I focused on it, and I said, you know, this is something that I'm going to do, because right now there were people in the legislature who were interested in some of these issues, but there were really no voices who were able to successfully navigate the waters on this. And so I actually decided that was going to be my top priority, and I used it to really educate